Constantinople, the queen of cities. For 1,000 years, the golden capital of the Byzantine Empire represented impregnability and unwavering Christian dominion. Its colossal Theodosian walls were not merely defensive structures. They were the physical embodiment of a civilization determined to survive the onslaught of rising powers, especially the surging tide of the early Islamic Caliphate. When we think of the Adhan, the Muslim call to prayer, echoing across Istanbul, our minds immediately jump to 1453 and the conquest by Sultan Mehmed II. However, history is rarely so linear. Long before the great cannons breached the Triple Walls, long before the ultimate Ottoman victory, the sacred words of the Adhan sounded, once, briefly and controversially, within the very site of Hagia Sophia. To understand this moment, we must journey back to a period of intense rivalry and unexpected diplomatic maneuverings in the early 8th century.
The early Muslim caliphates viewed Constantinople as the ultimate prize and the final frontier of expansion in the West. Following the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the Islamic armies moved with astonishing speed, conquering vast swaths of the Middle East, North Africa, and Persia. By the mid-7th century, the Umayyad Caliphate controlled immense resources and military might, positioning itself directly against the ailing yet resilient Byzantines. The first serious attempt to take the city occurred between 674 and 678 AD. This lengthy blockade ended in utter failure, primarily due to the Byzantine secret weapon, Greek fire, a terrifying water-resistant incendiary substance that decimated the Muslim fleet. This failure taught the Caliphate a harsh lesson. Siege warfare against this city required unprecedented preparation and endurance.
The stage for the forgotten Adhan was set during the Second Great Siege of Constantinople, which began in 717 AD. Leading this monumental effort was Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik, the brother of the Caliph Suleiman and one of the most respected and capable military commanders of the era. Maslama arrived at the head of a massive force. Historians estimate an army of perhaps 80,000 to 120,000 men and a substantial fleet, with the clear mandate to conquer the city once and for all. Simultaneously, the Byzantines, under the newly installed Emperor Leo III the Isaurian, prepared for a defense that would determine the fate of Christian Europe. The siege was brutal, lasting over a year, characterized by starvation, harsh winter conditions, and the ever-present threat of Byzantine counterattacks. The long duration of the siege meant that Maslama's army needed semi-permanent structures. They weren't just encamped, they were living outside the walls for what they expected to be years. This need for permanent logistics led to the most intriguing historical exchange. According to various non-Muslim, particularly Byzantine and later Syriac sources, Maslama engaged in a pragmatic dialogue with the Emperor Leo III. The situation was tense. The city was suffering, but the Muslim forces were equally stressed by disease and supply chain issues, exacerbated by Bulgarian attacks. It was in this geopolitical stalemate that Maslama, reflecting the sophisticated administrative approach of the Umayyads, made a highly unusual request, one that intertwined military necessity with spiritual requirement. Maslama understood that the morale and religious discipline of his massive army were paramount. His request to Leo III was for the allowance of a dedicated space for prayer. The accounts vary slightly on whether the space was just outside the immediate fortifications or, crucially, whether it was permitted within a negotiated area inside the city proper, perhaps near the port or a market district. The most sensational, though heavily debated, account suggests that Leo III, seeing the prolonged standoff, granted Maslama permission to construct a small, temporary prayer facility, a masjid, for the use of Muslim envoys, prisoners, or those involved in ongoing negotiations, perhaps as a sign of goodwill, or more likely, to preserve the tenuous truce needed for prisoner exchange and logistical stability. It was an unprecedented allowance by a Christian emperor to a besieging Muslim force.
It is here, in this temporary, diplomatic, and highly vulnerable space, that the first documented public Muslim call to prayer in Constantinople occurred. The muezzin, likely one of Maslama's trusted attendants, would have ascended the makeshift structure. As the sun traversed the sky 5 times daily, the sacred Arabic words, Allahu Akbar, Hayya ala Salah, would have cut through the noise of the siege, a melodic, powerful declaration of faith ringing out across the walls that symbolized the ultimate resistance to that very faith. Imagine the psychological impact on the Byzantine defenders. They were accustomed to the chanting of priests and the ringing of church bells. Now, the sound of the rival faith, a faith that threatened their very existence, was audible, an acoustic intrusion into their sacred city. This Adhan was not a celebration of conquest, but a defiant, insistent affirmation of presence, heard in the city centuries before the final fall.
The siege ultimately failed. Despite the intense organization and Maslama's determination, the combined forces of the Byzantine defenses, the harsh winter, and crucial intervention from the Bulgarians decimated the Umayyad army. By 718 AD, Maslama was forced to abandon the siege, resulting in a catastrophic loss of men and material for the caliphate. However, the legacy of that temporary mosque persisted. While the immediate structure was certainly abandoned or demolished after the retreat, the memory of Muslim presence and authorized prayer within or immediately adjacent to the capital became a historical reference point. It demonstrated to both sides that diplomacy and religious tolerance, however fragile, could momentarily supersede outright war, even during existential conflict. It was a stark reminder that the Islamic world was not just a military threat, but a civilization demanding its religious rights. The existence of this early mosque and the associated Adhan is corroborated by multiple chroniclers across different cultures. The 10th century historian al-Masudi, among others, speaks of the remnants of the mosque built by Maslama. Furthermore, later agreements between the Byzantines and successive caliphates occasionally included clauses related to the rights of Muslim merchants or envoys to pray. For example, treaties sometimes stipulated a designated area in the city, often identified in the region of the Tsimitsis district, where Muslim diplomatic missions could reside and practice their faith. This continuity suggests that Maslama's original action was not entirely erased from the historical record, but rather set a precedent, paving the way for small, controlled Muslim presences throughout the later centuries, always under the watchful eye of the imperial authorities.
Why is this detail about Maslama and the first Adhan so crucial? It profoundly challenges the popular narrative of Constantinople as a purely isolated Christian bastion until 1453. It demonstrates that the city was in fact a deeply contested space, culturally and diplomatically porous long before its final conquest. This early Adhan was a geopolitical act, a moment where the spiritual needs of the caliphate were recognized, even temporarily, by its greatest rival. While the final conquest brought the construction of permanent, monumental mosques, like the conversion of Hagia Sophia, this small, temporary prayer space served as a symbolic harbinger, a faint echo of the future that the Byzantine emperors desperately sought to prevent. It underscores the centuries of complex, often contradictory relationships between the two major global powers.
Centuries passed. The Umayyads gave way to the Abbasids, and later the Seljuks and Ottomans. Constantinople, while shrinking, survived. The memory of the 717 siege faded into legend, but the idea that the Adhan had once been sounded within sight of the walls remained a powerful symbolic aspiration for succeeding Muslim rulers. When the Ottomans, under Sultan Mehmed II, initiated their final, devastating siege in 1453, the stakes were far higher, the technology vastly superior, and the goal absolute conquest, not negotiated truce. Yet the history of Maslama served as a reminder that the spiritual contest had begun 7 centuries prior. That initial, humble call to prayer was a whisper compared to the roar that followed Mehmed's victory. But it was the first time that spiritual declaration had publicly challenged the established order of the Byzantine capital.
The nature of the Adhan, the very structure of the call, is a public, rhythmic assertion of faith. When Maslama orchestrated that call in the 8th century, he wasn't just facilitating prayer, he was planting a spiritual flag, asserting the universality of Islam even in the face of Byzantine resistance. While Leo III might have intended the allowance as a minor diplomatic concession, for the soldiers of the caliphate, it was a profound act of religious continuity, a piece of home and discipline carried into the heart of the enemy. It stands as a testament to the early sophistication of the caliphate's statecraft and its ability to negotiate religious space, even during peak hostility. This episode highlights that history's grand narratives often overlook the smaller, highly significant moments of cultural exchange and contestation that occur long before the final decisive battles are fought.
The story of Maslama ibn al-Malik and the Adhan of 717 AD is a powerful example of how deep and complex the relationship between the Islamic world and the Byzantine Empire truly was. It teaches us that moments of tension often conceal moments of reluctant tolerance and calculated exchange. This first whispered call to prayer in Constantinople may have been brief and the temporary mosque short-lived, but it left an indelible mark on the historical consciousness of both civilizations. It was the original acoustic intrusion, setting the stage for the millennia-long dialogue between East and West, and reminding us that major historical turning points often have long forgotten antecedents. If you found this journey into hidden history fascinating, please ensure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to keep unearthing these vital, complex stories from the annals of time. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates.